Hello everyone. So welcome to the next session in our modern Indian history course, and today we'll continue our theme 4. In the last session in the theme 4 we talked about the modern education, what were the intent with which this modern education has been given in India, the role of the British, the missionaries and the Indian intellectual class who wanted that this modern education should come to India. Today we'll talk about two important topics. First, we'll talk about the press, the different kinds of restrictions that have been imposed, restrictions then ease, and what have happened. So chronologically important. Then the nationalism in India, advent of the modern nationalism in India, and we will look at it. Let's talk about it. Let us do one question. So the question is, in the UPSC 1997, there was correct chronological sequence of the Woods Education Dispatch, Macaulay's Minute on Education, Sargent Education Report, and Indian Education Hunter Commission. It's a very easy question. Just pause the video and try to answer the question. Last session, we talked about the utility of, we'll solve more questions, obviously, in the coming sessions. But the utility of or the way it can be asked in the education, a lot of commissions and committees have been set up, and you need to remember it chronologically. Now we know that Wood's Education Dispatch 1854, Macaulay's Minutes 1835, Sergeant Plan 1944, and Hunter Commission 1882. So chronologically, if we arrange, the first will be Minute, then Woods, then 4, and then third. So the answer is first only. Okay. So you can expect one such question again, and they can mix not only the education one, they can mix any political event with the education one. So it's the if the question next question comes in the chronology, and I've already told you that chronology based questions now are very important in your modern history and your ancient medieval history and art and culture. Very important. But they can now ask question one event from one political, one from press, and one from, let's say, modern education. They can ask you which event has happened earliest. These questions you can see previous 2 to 3 years have been asked. So the difficulty level within the chronology questions have increased. They can ask cross topic questions as well as the earliest one, so you need to know the details of each and every one. Here you can do some guessing and all, but here becomes more difficult. No, chalo. Now let's talk about the Indian reaction to the British rule. Now Indian reaction to the British rule can be seen as an immediate reaction as well as an ideological reaction. Within the ideological reactions, we have seen the development of the organizations, development of the education, press, and awareness, creating awareness among the masses. One of the tool was the modern education, which we'll see, which will lead to the modern nationalism or Indian nationalism. And today we'll talk about the press. Now, before entering into the press, what is important? What type of question you can expect? One few things you need to understand. First, what do you mean by the pre-censorship? That means that before I publish my newspaper into the open, I have to get my newspaper to show to some authority. The authority will see the newspaper and they'll say, okay, these things are fine, now go ahead and publish it. So this is a kind of a pre-censorship, that your content is pre-censored before being released into the public. The authorities can see that, so that if anything is written against them, they can put some penal action on the editor or on the newspaper itself. Other things are that they can discriminate, okay, the Indian's paper and in the English paper. So, and overall, if you see different context, for example, Lord Wellesley will face the context of the French invasion. World War I will be different context, World War II will be different context, and you will see different methods being imposed to put restrictions on the press. So what from the prelim side, some of the acts, some of the things, those are important. through which the restrictions have been kept. Now, obviously, if the restriction has been kept, someone will come and will liberate it also. Charles Metcalfe will have read that. So you need to remember that also. So remember it like in a phase. Okay, improved, stress put, improved, stress put, improved. Next. So this is one thing that you can remember from Prince's perspective. What is relevant from Prince's perspective. From the main's perspective is the role of the press itself. Role of the press and the role of the early nationalist. What are the different roles have been played out by the press, and how it has been a very good tool in the hands of the early nationalists to get to their message to the masses. How press was a very, very important tool in that regard. Now, if we talk about the historical context of the press, so first printing press in India was a Portuguese, first book published in 1557. Some of the facts that you need to remember: EIC printing press in Bombay in 1684. The first newspaper which came into being was the Bengal Gazette or Calcutta Journal Advertiser. These questions sometimes come in the state PCS or in the some other exam. So James Augustus Hickey in 1780 started the first newspaper in India, which was seized in 1872 because of the outspoken criticism of the government. Later on, more journals and almost each and every social reformer or each and every freedom fighter has their own newspapers through which they used to write. Gandhiji, his cell phone, Annie Besant, Lokman Tilak, everyone almost had a newspaper that they want to convey their thoughts to. Let us talk about the restrictions. First, the early restrictions. So, starting with the censorship of the press acts in the time of the Lord Wellesley. So, the context was the French invasion. They have said, okay, we will pre censor it, that you have to showcase our content, otherwise, we'll put some penal action. The common theme will be there. And it was relaxed under the Lord Hastings, that we have seen that Lord Hastings has relaxed some of the press restrictions that have been kept in 1818. Then comes a very reactionary licensing regulation of 1823. So acting Governor General John Adams has said that press, if they operate without license, they will be penalized. Even the Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Mirat ul Akbar, who was not directly in confrontation with the empire, it has to stop at publication, and he was very much. That is why in the Raja Ram Mohan Roy's discussion, we have talked about the press, his views on the press, because he, in his lifetime, he has seen this licensing regulation of 1823. You know? So Raja Ram Mohan Roy will protest against it. Then you have the Press Act of 1835. So it was good for Indians. That is known as the Metcalfe Act. It repealed the 1823 ordinance, and that is why it is known as the Liberator of Press. Yes, some restrictions were there, but this draconian act that was removed by the Charles Metcalfe. Then you can imagine the revolt of 1857 has happened. Revolt of 1857 has happened now. Licensing Act of 1857 has came into being. So during the time of 1857, some emergency powers have been given to restrict through licensing. Then again, Registration Act of 1867 has come. That is of a regulative nature, not a restrictive nature. So, for example, proper act has been come that every book or newspaper required to print the name of the printer, publisher, and the place of publication, a copy to be submitted to the local government within a month of the publication of the book. Yes, some sort of censorship was there, but it was more of a regulative in nature. So these were some early restrictions. Now, the early nationalists are coming, especially after 1857. Now, how will they use the press? Press will be a tool in their hand. They will use a press under the overarching use of, or they consider the freedom of press as a very important component of the civil liberties. Okay? So overall demand of the improving the civil liberty, the situation of the civil liberties in India, they will consider the freedom of press as a very, very important component to it. Raja Ram Mohan Rai, we have discussed his opposition to 1823 restrictions. From 1870 to 18 1918, that is the phase of the extremist and moderates, then the extremist within the Congress. We'll discuss these terms in the next session. So moderates and the extremists, they talk about the political propaganda through press, education, formation of opinion, propagation of nationalist ideology, arousing, training, mobilization, consolidation of the public opinion. Now, in this time, from 1870 to 1918, before the Gandhi's arrival, the politics was not based upon the mass agitation. It was more upon the awareness of the people, getting people aware. We have discussed that the politics was not based upon the masses, it was based upon the classes. The masses questions are being dealt with, but masses are not involved. Masses are restricted. And that is why when the Gandhi ji will come, he will remove this barrier and allow everyone to participate in the agitation. So this was the press, which was used as a tool to spread its ideology. ठीक? So these things were not happening at that time. Mass agitation, active mobilization through open meetings. So when the open meetings are not happening, how will you communicate your thoughts? How will you tell the people that Britishers are doing these things? So you need to tell them, and you will tell them only and only through press. For example, very important, there used to be library movements. So these newspapers were not for the profit making purpose, rather rendering the national and the public service. You can see how the things have changed, isn't it? So they stimulated a library movement. That means the impact was not limited to cities and town, but for example, in a village, one newspaper has come. Now a lot of people cannot read that newspaper. So one person will take the newspaper and he will read in front of the a lot of people. And when that is done, the people come together, people discuss. When that person tells something, the other people discuss about it, though they cannot read the newspaper, but that particular person serves as a hub. These are known as the local libraries were created, which will gather around a single newspaper, and they'll discuss with charm and a lot of delight and a lot of feeling of nationalism, and all these things espouse the feeling of nationalism. Even if a person is writing from Punjab is being read in the other states. So that created a sense of the bonds of the fraternity among the people. That yes, the causes of the people or the problems that the peasants are facing in the Punjab are the similar to the problems that we are facing today, or in our own state, let's say in Madhya Pradesh, or let's say in Odisha and these states. So the people will realize when we are facing the same issues, what were the problem in the previous revolts that we have discussed. Those revolts have been very localized. There was no aggregation of the people's opinion. People's opinion were not aggregated, while the press act as an aggregator of the people's opinion. Aggregator of the people's opinion. ठीक? They filtered every public opinion and they created a bonds of the fraternity among the people. These libraries served the purpose of not only a political education but also political participation. Now they acted as an institution of opposition to the government. The government obviously did not like it, so they will introduce some of the acts such as Section 124A of Penal Act, very important sedition, very controversial colonial legacy, which provided that anyone trying to cause disaffection against the British government in India to be transported for life or imprisonment for 3 years. Now, the nationalist will find the innovative method, especially the moderates. They will say they want to say something and they will find some innovative method to say those things. What do we mean by that? Very interesting. For example, if I have to criticize you, what I will do, I'll sugarcoat it. So basically, a kind of sugar coating was done. So, for example, before I tell something to the government, I will say, no, 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 government, you are fine, you are fine. आप सब अच्छा कर रहे हो, you are doing everything fine, but please look at this thing. This thing is not there. So first, it will be prefaced with the sentiments of the loyalty to the government, ठीक? Or they will quote from the British papers. ठीक? that whatever is being written in the British, because there these kind of restrictions are not there in those paper in the Britain. So there the people who are challenging the British government, critical writing of the socialist or the Irish nationalists from the newspaper in England, they used to be quoted ki bhai, they have said it, we are not saying it, we are just printing what we have read, these people have said it, and we are also saying that we are loyal to you. But in doing so, we are trying to create a complete idea that what are the things you are doing to us, but in a very intelligent way. Why they have to resort to this way? So that they do not get a lot of restriction, they do not get imprisoned. If they get imprisoned, everything is shallow. Then it was difficult task which required the intelligent mix of simplicity with subtlety. So subtly they want to showcase their thoughts. Now a lot of leaders, as we have discussed, have their own papers. For example, G Subramanyam Iyer, Hindu, Sudesh Darshan, the Hindu, our Hindu, Surinath Banerjee, Bengali, Dada Bhai Energy, Voice of India, Amrit Bajar Patrika, and so on and so forth. There is a list in your book, that is the book a lot of people refer, that is Spectrum, in which in the last few pages they have given a appendix on the newspaper and the journals. What would be my suggestion to you? My suggestion to you ki please read it through at least 5 to 6 times. Highlight with the highlighter. If you want to take the photocopy, paste somewhere, and keep reading 1 to 2 times, 3 times. Highlight the importance one, the leaders which you have read. For example, Derozio. By Derozio ki Indian Gadget. So important people, important journals, highlight those, and that's all. So remember at least 5 to 10 examples which you can quote in your mains, and that can be asked in the prelims. Okay? Then comes a very watershed act, a very important act, that is the Vernacular Press Act. You must have heard of it. Very one of the examples of the reactionary policies of the Lord Lytton. Now, Lord Lytton, when he came to rule, he had a lot of reactionary policies. For example, India was facing a lot of famine, but Lord Lytton has come and organized a Delhi Darbar, which was a very lavish, in on which a lot of money was spent. Now the nationalists and the newspapers were very, very angry with Lord Lytton. That what are you doing? People are dying in the one hand, and you are spending the money on these grand darbars. This is not good. Okay? So this was the context of the Vernacular Press Act. Some more context after 1857 revolt. What happened? After 1857 revolt, the British media and the English media got, or the vernacular media got divided. Earlier, the British media also used to report about the challenges, why so many revolts are happening in India, and these things. But with the revolt of 1857, the death of so many English officers, they have also said कि भाई whatever the Britishers are doing, they're doing the right thing, because these Indians are barbarians. That's being the opinion created in the Britain. While the vernacular press or the Indian media was very, very angry, the kind of repressions have been taking place before 1857, after 1857, the policies such as divide and counter poison, all these things. So Gulf was created. In this context, the Vernacular Press Act comes in the times of the Lord Lytton. So the idea was to design a better control the vernacular press and effectively punish and repress the seditious writing. Okay? So better control of the vernacular press was the major objective of the Vernacular Press Act. Let us see some of the provisions. So the DM, district magistrates, was empowered to call upon the printer or the publisher of any vernacular newspaper to enter into a bond with the government. So they have to, if you are a newspaper, if you're selling the newspaper, you have to sign a bond with the local authority, not to cause disaffection among the government and antipathy between the people of different region and all these things. The printer and the publisher, first of all, they'll sign the bond, then they will deposit some money. They have to deposit some money, and if they do so, their money will be forfeited. Their money will not be returned. Okay? and their press equipment will be seized if they do anything like it. So every power has been given to the local authority, that as deemed fit you can do all these things. So if the media goes a bit critical against the government, go ahead and crash them. The magisterial action was final and no appeal could be made in the court of law, no judicial review. A vernacular newspaper could get exemption from the operation drawback by submitting the proofs of the to a government censor. You have to submit a lot of proof that why the government is doing so and all these things, which was obviously difficult. Before that, they will come and smash you. That is why this act was also known as the Gagging Act. Known as the Gagging Act. So the feature which was the problem, that is the discrimination between English and the vernacular press and no right to appeal. You can see, even if something is done by the executive, judiciary needs to be there to mend those things. There should be a right to appeal. Now they were instituted WPA, VPA, that is Vernacular Press Act. The proceedings instituted against the Som Prakash, Bharat Mihir, Dakka Prakash, and Samachar. One interesting, that is Amrit Bazar Patrika. Overnight, it converted from a Bengali to a your Bengali, but a vernacular language to an English language paper overnight, so that to escape the Vernacular Press Act. And later on, obviously, such draconian act was repealed, and the press commissioner was appointed to supply authentic and accurate news to the press, done in the times of the Lord Ripon, who came after the Lord Lytton. So Vernacular Press Act was seen as a very big reaction, gagging act. Nobody liked it. And you can see in 1878 this happened. In 1885 Congress is formed. So when you talk about that, why it was the formation of a Congress was not a singular event. It was in making the subjective conditions of it. And this is one of the examples, such as the Vernacular Press Act. Now, Lokman Tilak is very famous with respect to and the whole press thing. He was a champion of the thought freedom of press and the government repression on him. Now, they were not happy with the Tilak because Tilak was one of the leaders of the extremist within the Congress. Now, within the Congress, second element, that is moderate. The government was more than happy with the moderates because moderates were not asking for a lot. They were moderates in their views and they moderates in their actions. But the extremists were not moderate in their action. They used to organize people. They clearly, it can be seen that he is organizing the people. He's telling them about the misgivings of the government. So Ganpati festival, Shivaji festival, in his newspaper Kesari and Maratha, he has supported earlier a plague has happened in Pune. So the way it was solved by, or it was the way it was dealt by the plague commissioner Rand, people did not like it, the racism or the kind of brutality he has shown to the people, and he was killed by the Chapekar brothers. And this, when this was killed, the Tilak has supported the Chapekar brothers, and the government was looking for an opportunity to put him into jail. So one of the speeches the Tilak has given, speeches he has quoted how the Shivaji has killed the Afzal Guru. And we have read that story, right? So they have used this speech as an incitement. His incitement to violence. He is promoting the incitement to violence and put him into the 18-month prison. Then later on in 1908, also Tilak was put for 6 years into the jail because of this. Let us see very quickly. So two of his disciples, that is Chapekar brothers Damodar and Balakrishna, murdered the plague commissioner Rand in 1897. The Tilak was arrested after the murder of the Rand on the basis of the publication of the poem Shivaji's utterances in Keshari and the speech in which Tilak delivered at the Shivaji justifying Afzal's murder by Shivaji. Tilak's defense of the Shivaji's killing by Afzal Guru was portrayed by prosecution as an incitement to kill the British officials, which the Chapekar brothers have done. So Tilak was guilty and 18 months prison have been given. And when the imprisonment has been given, and that has made him a very famous. That is why he got the title of the Lokmanya, that is respected and honored by the people, a new leader who preached with his deeds. Then again in 1808, 1908, sorry, one more event happened. Praful Chaki and Khudiram Bose, they threw a bomb at carriage in the Muzaffarnagar, killing to kill the chief presidency magistrate, but killed the two women traveling in it. One of them, Chaki, committed suicide, and Bose was hanged. Now Tilak, in his paper, that is Kesari, defended the revolutionaries, called for Swaraj or self rule. This was after the Swadeshi movement. So he has defended them, and he said that Swaraj needs to be given and all these things. And based upon that, he was put into the prison again for the 6-year punishment, charged with sedition. So newspaper incitement to offense act 1908 has come, aimed at extreme against the extremist national activity. The act empowered the magistrates to confiscate press property, which punished the objectionable material likely to cause incitement to murders and acts of violence. Later on, we will see it is also the time of this heroic individualism. The people will come and kill these people. Okay, so these are the things that we will see in the when we'll see after the extremists. This was the time after post your or in and around your Swadeshi movement. Tilak, the leader of the militant nationalists, was tried on the charges of sedition and transported to Mandalay for 6 years. This led to countrywide protests in Bombay. Textile worker and railway took him to the arms and all these things. Lenin held him as the entrance of the Indian working class on the political stage. So this was press and Lokmanya Tilak. Later on, within this category, government amended this section 124A and added one more amendment, that is 153A, which made it a criminal offense for anyone to bring into contempt of the government of India to create hatred among the different classes and all these things. So you can see the government is getting repressive as the nationalism will get more, as the people will start to fight after 1857 revolt. People become aware, people organization, setting up an organization, nationalism increasing. Now, as the nationalism is increasing, the repressions will also increase, and stricter laws will be made. Two of them that we have discussed, that is newspaper incitement to offense and then Indian Press Act of 1910. So it revived the worst feature of the Vernacular Press Act. Local government empowered to demand security at the registration, and 2 copies have to be sent to the local government without any money. Okay. Then during the First World War, and what about the till Second World War? So during the First World War, they have set up this Defense of India rules. So basically, in this, they can do anything. It gives them anything because war is a very extreme situation. So they impose the repression of the political agitation, anything that is said against the government and all these things. So free public criticism has been, if they do it, then they will be put under the penal provisions. After the World War I, recommendation of the press committee, led by Tej Bahadur Sapru, said that repeal this 1800 Act and 1810 repeal. So repeal these two acts, the previous two laws that have become very draconian, because now slowly and slowly you will see in 1917, the government has said that we will provide a responsible government in India. So after that, the committee was set up and then they have repealed these two acts. During the World War II, under the Defense of India rules, pre-censorship was imposed. An amendment is the Press Emergency Act and Official Secrets Act during the World War II. And publication of the all news related to the INC was declared as illegal. So these are the things that you need to remember. So what are the things that you need to focus? एक थोड़ा सा make a chart of it. कि भाई when the restrictions are imposed, key acts, let's say 1823, Charles Metcalfe, Vernacular Press Act, 1808 Act, Tilak story. So it will help you to write good answer in your mains, because in the mains all common points are the same. What is the role of the press? But when you give it with examples, then it becomes more good answer. Role of the press very quickly. So from 1870 to 1819, powerful newspapers have emerged. Public consciousness has been increased about the police, British atrocity and the activities of the freedom fighter, their ideas, let's say. So political tasks, political propaganda, education, formation of nationalist ideology. The press also talked about or also showcased the poems, songs, articles that have been published. Many leaders have been the journalists, as we have discussed. Social reformers put their ideas to the people. For example, a lot of social reformers, we have seen the works they have done. How will we tell their people that these things are wrong? How will they create a public opinion? How will they create that conscience, or how will they shake their conscience of the people? How will they persuade them? All these things are done through press. So they force the bonds of the fraternity. This is the all about the press. That is what we are going to read. The next part of the discussion, that is the nationalism in India. What we are going to study, first we'll talk about that what is the difference between a nation and a state. Then we talk about that how the growth of the modern nationalism has went into India. We have discussed everything. Just to summarize it and putting it in a very structured way, that is the idea. Okay. Chalo. So what is the difference between nation and state? Let us take few examples. For example, in Sri Lanka, Tamilians are there, right? So Tamilian Sri Lanka itself is a nation state. But the Tamilians themselves are not state. We can consider to be a nation. Okay. Next, for example, Israel Palestine. Israel is a nation state. But Palestine is what? Palestine is a nation. Palestine is not a state. Okay. So what is the difference between both the terms? First, if we talk about the state is basically a political definition, a political institution. A political institution having these four categories. Population should have some people, territory should have some territory, government, they should have a government, and the sovereignty. For example, Kurds in your Middle East, they are what? They have the population, they have the territory, they have some sort of government, but they don't have the sovereignty. How this sovereignty comes? When there is a recognition from the other nation. There needs to be recognition from the other nation for that sovereignty to exist. For example, India was one of the first countries which has recognized, let's say, or when India recognized the Tibet is a part of China, so Tibet sovereignty is no more there with respect to India. For example, Taiwan, no country, very few countries recognize Taiwan as a very sovereign country. So Taiwan cannot be said to be a state. Only a few countries recognize it. So that sovereignty is there when all the other countries recognize your existence. That's the idea. Now, the difference between nation and the state, with the few examples, we are able to clear it. Kurds, Tamilians in Sri Lanka, you know, Israel, Palestine. Let us see a few definition very quickly. What easy here. An state is an independent political entity with the fixed geographical boundaries. So, fixed geographical boundaries. Nation is a large body of the people united by the common origin, history, and culture, ethnicity, or language. It refers to a territory. It refers to a group of people. It has a fixed territory. It does not have a fixed territory. कर्स की कोई fixed territory थोड़े ना है. It's a political and a legal entity. It's a socio-cultural entity. It can be created consciously. It cannot be created consciously. Not as stable as a state. More stable than a nation. Now this is important. ठीक है? So it is more stable than it cannot exist without sovereignty and can exist without sovereignty. This is not there. Now, the point is this, that states are not act stable because they are a political and a legal entity, while the nations are relatively more stable. States to break होते रहते हैं ना, states to break हुए, reorganization of the states, reorganization of the boundaries. These thing keeps on happening. Yugoslavia, USSR, and all these things. But the nations, the idea is a nation because it is a socio-cultural entity, and that has been built upon years after years, decades after decades. So it is more stable. So nations are more stable. It cannot exist without sovereignty. It can exist without sovereignty. Very good example: Israel, Palestine, Kurds, and this. United by laws and regulation, united by the bonds and the shared history. Chalo. So if you talk about the Indian nationalism, you can say the rise of the Indian nationalism, that yes, we belong to same. Earlier, what is the idea? Understand this. Earlier, it was said a lot of British historians, in fact, some of the Indian historians or Indian thinkers have thought that India is nothing but a geographical expression, which is situated near the in the Indian Ocean. Himalaya is there, so India is nothing but a geographical expression. It's not a nation, right? Because why it's not a nation? Because it's so diverse. There are a lot of nations within India. Within India, a lot of small nations are there. India itself is not a state. Obviously, it's not a state. It's not a nation also, and that is why some moderates called it nation in the making. But as a lot of factors have crept into the politics, a lot of factors have crept into the politics. The feeling of the unity of the people from here to here, from here to here, that has started to come up. And then the sense of a by in India, we are as a nation is there. We have to fight together. We have to work together to fight these Britishers. So this was the idea, that is the growth of the modern nationalism, that we are able to find that solidarity with the other part of the India. Though we are divided with the different diversities, linguistic diversity, regional diversity, geographical diversity, cuisine diversity, cultural diversity, social diversity, but we found reasons to stay together and become a part of one India. So that's the idea. So Indian nationalism, if we see, so it came as a strong reaction to the British imperialist policy, that what these Britishers are doing. Then the worldwide also, the concept of the nationalism and the concept of the self right to self determinations was getting very, very strong, especially in South America, not in Africa. This is South America. So the concept of the nationalism was getting very, very prominent. A lot of countries getting decolonized in the South America. Then the Indian Renaissance, the socio-cultural reform movements. Those movements have also given a lot of unity, as cultural roots, for example, that we are together. It is the British who have taken over us and all these things. And it was also the offshoot of the modernism given by the Britishers, whether it was the modern education, whether it was the press, or whether it was the transportation and communication. Because now the people from one part of the India can travel to the next part of the India, and when they'll travel, obviously it will create some bonds of the fraternity. If we talk about the growth of the nationalism, so you can see different factors, thus those four factors going into the different subdividing into different factors. Reactionary British rule, modern education, inspiration from the West, discovery of India's past. So these are the points. Let us very quickly discuss and finish it. Starting with the first one, that is reactionary British rule. So exploitative in economic, we have discussed ruralization, deindustrialization, very hard and toxic land revenue policies, very extractive without any development of the Indian agriculture. Famines, so many famines happened. Racial discrimination, whether it is a civil services, whether it is army. So racial discrimination was very much evident, which happening to Indian. Reactionary policies, especially in the times of the Lord Lytton. There is a Ilbert Bill controversy, which we'll discuss later. Ilbert Bill controversy was there. Vernacular Press Act, Arms Act, Lord Lytton, getting this Darbar in the times of the famine. So all these things have created an impact on the psyche of the Indian people, that we don't have to, or we can see the true nature of the British rule. Hence, we have to come together and fight. Political unity was also there with the modern transportation and communication. Now, the political unity was also created by the Britishers themselves because of the administrative conveniences, uniform rules, uniform laws, a bit communication, transportation that they have to create. For their own necessity, they have to create this political unity, and that has later on worked in favor of the Indians. Rediscovery of the India past. People realize that we all share the same heritage. India in the past was not as they talked about the Mauryas, the Guptas, that how India was united at that time. Cholas used to go out there and go to they used to call Bay of Bengal as their own lake. So we have that past to which we should be proud of, and we have a past to which we all belong. Then the modern education and inspiration, Western ideas, press, nationalistic literature, these things are created. So that gives the idea that if that can happen in the other countries, why not India? Similarly, the demonstration effect, the new nation states are coming up, how Japan, a very small country, has beaten Russia in 1905. So all these things created a sense of self-confidence. Japan, an Asian country, has beaten a Russia. Ethiopia has fought against the Italy. Small countries fighting against the big giants, the imperial giants. Then the new leadership which has come, economic critic Dadabhai Naroji, for example, new social classes, middle class is coming up, political parties they are bringing, political institutions that they are creating. We'll discuss a few political institutions. So all this has led to the growth of the nationalism in India. You can be asked the question, the different factor for growth of nationalism, use that same content, very precise, to the point, and within some subheadings. This is why I made this diagram. So in the mains examination, just first of all try to get the concept in. You need to understand the concept, then replicate with a lot of examples of very diverse examples or diverse ideas. Okay. So this was your growth of the nationalism. Let us discuss few organizations. Now feeling of the nationalism has crept into it, India coming. Now that has to be tapped, and now some institutions will be created to tap that particular feeling. Some institutions pre 1857 and post 1857, and finally they all culminate in the formation of an all India character organization, that is the uh, Indian National Congress. Tick. So it was Indian National Congress was not the first or political organization in India. However, most of the political association in the early half of the century were dominated by the wealthy and the aristocratic element here. Pre 1857, a lot of aristocrats and the wealthy people used to dominate this. Then after 1857, the new middle class, lawyers, doctors, educators, teachers, these have come and these have come and taken up the leadership of these institutions, which later on culminated in the formation of an INC. Now, if you look at the organizations, you can divide the organizations area wise or region wise. This is Bombay, this is Calcutta, and this is the Madras. So you can remember like that, remember through chronology, and that is all the discussions you have. But this is again something that you have to cram. If you talk about pre 1857 organizations, so first starting with academic associations at Calcutta, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, then Bang Bhasha Prashasanik Prakashik Sabha, that was not Raja Ram Mohan Roy, but the friends of the Raja Ram Mohan Roy. They'll discuss about these ideas that civil liberty needs to be there, and they will appeal to the government, please do this, and all these things they will do. Then Society for Acquisition of General Knowledge, they'll discuss trial by jury, free press, civil liberties. Very importantly, that is the Landholder Society. So basically it was upheld for safeguarding the interest of the landlords, led by Dwarkanath Tagore, and started organized political activities. So it was the first organization when the organized political activities can be seen, that were the Landholder Society. Though dominated by the wealthy and the aristocratic elements, but it did started the political activities. Then you have the British India Society in London, then very important Bengal British India Society. They talk about objective of collection and dissemination of information relating to the actual condition of the people of India, to employ other means such as peaceful and lawful character as may appear, to calculate, to secure the welfare, extend the just rights, advance the interests of the classes and fellow subject, and all these things. In 1851, there was a merger between the Landholder Society and Bengal British India Society. Take Landholder Society previously and then Bengal British India Society, and they created the British Indian Association. Now, British Indian Association became a very important organization pre 1857. So it sent a petition to the British Parliament demanding the inclusion of some of its suggestions in the renewed charter that is of 1853 charter that we have studied. So, such as establishment of a separate legislature of a popular character, separation of executive from the judicial function, reduction in the salaries, and abolition of salt duties, and all these things. You don't have to remember these things. Huh? They were partially accepted in the Charter Act of 1853, which is important that we have discussed, and provided for addition of 6 members to the Governor General Council for the legislative purpose. We have seen in 1853 Council Act, the first time the legislative mini parliament has been created. Then we have a lot of organizations pre 1857. Then came the revolt, and post revolt, consciousness of the people has increased. Political consciousness, that how regressive this British government is. Or when these people have revolted, people also thought that why this revolt has come. What was the need? It was such a big problem. People were facing a lot of discrimination. So they need to be tackled. So hence a lot of institutions will come post 1857. So starting with the first one, that is East India Association, that was established in London by Dadabhai Nauroji. So the idea was that he will discuss the Indian questions there in the England. He was also the MP in the British Parliament later on. So discuss Indian question, influence public men in the England. That okay, when they'll influence them, then they will do good things in India, like that. So pressure. Then Pune Sarvajanik Sabha was created in Bombay by M.G. Ranade, serve as a bridge between the government and the people. So these are the few keywords that you need to remember. So serving as a bridge to government and the people. Then Indian League by Shishir Kumar Ghosh, object of stimulating a sense of nationalism among the people, of encouraging the political education. More organizations have come up: Indian Association of Calcutta, Madras Mahajan Sabha, and Bombay Presidency Association. Badruddin Tayyib ji, Firoz Shah Mehta, K.T. Telang, and all these things. Now, Indian Association, which is important one, Indian Association was the most important pre-Congress association. So one thing that you need to remember, and aimed at to promote every legitimate means, political, intellectual, and material advancement of the people. It set out to create a strong public opinion on the political issues, unify Indian people in the common political program. Ideas are very easy. Very important that you need to remember. They talked about one of the policies of the Lytton. Lytton has reduced the age of the people who can appear in the Indian civil services. Now, they protested against the reduction in the age limit in 1877 for the candidates of the Indian civil services exam. The association demanded the simultaneous holding the civil service examination in England and India and indigenization of the higher administrative post. It led to campaign against the Repressive Arms Act and the Vernacular Press Act. So your Indian Association is a very important organization, pre-Congress association, that you need to remember. Last part of our discussion today, what the things that they will campaign for. Imagine yourself. First of all, their campaign will be very specific to particular acts. For example, Lytton's Arms Act and all these things. Arms Act and all these things. Very specific. Then they will talk about the overall civil liberties, press freedoms. These things they will talk about. Now let us see some of their campaigns. So, for example, imposition of the import duty on the cotton, Arms Act, Vernacular Press Act in support of the Albert Bill, All India Fund for Political Agitation, campaign in Britain to vote for the pro-India party. For example, in Britain, so selecting a party which is pro-India. Now, Britain, you can imagine the politics. One party is saying that do good with India, another party is very reactionary. So also India now focus on this idea कि by Britain may will try to mobilize the public opinion to select a political party or to help the political party which is pro-India, that kind of thing. Indian Association, we have seen they have questioned the civil services thing. So with this, we finish our session. Anna, few of the questions that we'll be discussing in the next session, the main question which will be relevant from this. Now, what kind of questions you can expect? First of all, you can expect question ki bhai, about a few political organizations, their year. They can ask you to arrange those chronologically. They can ask you to, in the mains examination, they can ask you ki bhai, what were the campaigns, or they can ask you before Congress, what are the different political organizations which was active as an institution. So these are the questions can be asked, and in the prelims, chronology of these institutions. That's all. And the test series, you'll find a lot of questions which are based upon this idea. Okay? So let's, with this, we finish our session. In the next session, we'll talk about the Indian National Congress. We have reached up to the Indian National Congress. We'll talk about the Indian National Congress. We'll talk about the moderates and the extremists thereupon. With this, let's finish the session. See you all in the next session. Bye bye.